your statements are that in the Latin American context, that the regulations are either not as strong or that the enforcement of those regulations isn't as consistent. So in the Australian context, for example, there's legislation that requires young people from the age of 5 up to 16, 14 and 15, there can be an exception for them to attend school. And the law is that if a young person doesn't attend school, it's actually the parent who is held responsible, and they can be fined for their child's non-school attendance. Now, obviously, we don't want parents to be fined, right? Because that's, oftentimes parents who are being whose children aren't in school, have limited resources, that they might not be able to pay the fine, and then that would create more problems. So the work that we've been doing looks at what's called the regulatory pyramid, right? So at the pinnacle of the pyramid is prosecution for non-attendance at school. And there's different layers of that pyramid. So at the bottom, it's gaining willing compliance, right? So the willing compliance of the parent to have their child attend school. And then if they reject that, then there's some hand-holding and some more attention that's provided to the parent to get them to work with the child to attend school. So in the Australian context and in the British context as well, there's a lot of work that's been done around the regulatory pyramid. And so our work works at that bottom part of the regulatory pyramid, where we're trying to gain that willing compliance so that the young person actually attends school. And let me just pause on that for one moment. The issue in the Latin American context is if there's not that regulatory framework, then it makes it very difficult, because it makes it very much you either prosecute somebody or there's nothing in between, or you do nothing. And I think that's really what you're really talking about, is that there's not a graduated scale of the capacity to intervene. Now, without that graduated capacity to intervene, it means that the police are going to need to be a little bit more creative in the way that they engage people who are not complying. Now, in my work, we've been talking about young people attending school, but we've also looked at it in the context of hotels that have a lot of drug dealing going on in the hotels, or prostitution in hotels, people coming to the hotels to deal drugs, people taking a room to produce drugs and that sort of thing. We've also looked at it in the context of landlords renting their places to people who are producing drugs. We've looked at it in the context of commercial properties that are being used for criminal purposes. So it's not just in terms of truancy. So I think the challenge in the Latin American context is thinking about if you don't have that regulatory legal framework to work with, what do you have? What you do have is you have the opportunity for the partnership. So you might not have the legal framework, but you have the opportunity for the partnership. And that's going to take a little bit more creative thinking, because you don't have what we would call the legal lever. And the legal lever is it's like having the carrot incentivizing people to comply versus the stick, which is if you actually don't comply, you will be prosecuted. And what you're saying is that you have a very big stick, but you don't have the small sticks. And without the small sticks, you've not got a lot in between. But what you do have is you have the opportunity to forge the partnership. And in my research, and the most recent research that we've been doing, which is around the police in partnership with the schools and to working with the parents and the young people to comply with the law, what we've been infusing into the intervention is the dialogue, the language of procedural justice policing. And I'm sure many of your colleagues and viewers will know about procedural justice. My team at the University of Queensland, we have worked a lot on developing procedural justice dialogue. So what we mean by that is, what is it that the police need to say in gaining compliance from people to obey the law? So it's not about a lot of the research in procedural justice and police legitimacy has been in understanding what citizens think about the police and whether they think that they've been dealt with fairly. So my team have flipped it for the last 10 years to say, okay, let's operationalise the key elements of procedural justice. How do you convey trustworthy motives? How do you give voice to people that you're engaged with? How do you, out of the police officer's mouth, how do you convey dignity and respect? How do you actually demonstrate your neutrality in the decision making? So it's all very well and good to have these elements of procedural justice, but how do you actually operationalise that? So what we've infused into third-party policing is this dialogue of procedural justice policing, so that the encounter between the police, their third-party partner, and the citizen in the context that we've been working, the parent, the schools, the young person, so that the young person and the parent willingly comply with the requirement of that young person to go to school. And you would be absolutely surprised in a half an hour, 40-minute conversation between the police officer, a school representative, the parent, and the child, the way that the willing compliance for the young person to go to school is remarkable, that they actually end up going, wanting to go to school because of the way that it's being communicated. So what I'm suggesting for Latin America is, where you've got a little stick and you don't have the little stick, you've got the big stick, is that you manufacture this willing compliance through this procedural justice dialogue. But it has to be done with your partner. The partner has to be part of the solution. So it's not just the police talking to a young person to say you need to go to school. It needs the parent and the school representative as well. And you're welcome to go onto our website. It's the Ability School Engagement Program, and you can find that on the University of Queensland website.